your own mask at home?
Again?
Jeff? No, I was talking to Jeff.
Oh, talking to somebody else. Okay.
Yeah, I'm wearing a mask because I was exposed to coronavirus a few times, and they really don't give us the right PPE, so I don't want to get my wife sick. So I'm just gonna,
Okay.
That's a good precaution.
I assume I have it.
Well, hope you'll find.
So how is the sky in the USA now? Is it red or blue?
It is very blue right now. We can actually see it.
Very dark.
Well, whether it's red or blue, I think you've got to make sure your compound is green. Okay, we shall start now. Last 2 weeks ago, we spent quite a lot of time on Buddhism in Taiwan. Why do we spend so much time on Taiwan? Because Taiwan is said to be the home to Humanistic Buddhism. The popularity of Humanistic Buddhism is very much associated with the works of Buddhist movement in Taiwan. Although the slogan Humanistic Buddhism was promoted by Tai Shi way back in the 1930s, 1920s, it did not take root in China, so to say. And it was in 1949, the end of 1949, when Chiang Kai-shek's army fled to Taiwan. It was said that there was a total population of 2 million people follow him to Taiwan. And among them were monks. And today, actually, the Humanistic Buddhism that was advocated in mainland China was sort of transplanted into the island of Taiwan. Today, the 4 major mountains, you will see that Venerable Xing was from Taiwan. Venerable Wei Jie of the Zhongtai Temple was from Taiwan. Venerable Shen Yan was also from Taiwan. In fact, he retreated as an as a member of the army when he retreated to Taiwan. Only Tzu Chi's founder, Zhen Yan, was born locally in Taiwan. So the big exodus of monks from Taiwan, and including Ying Sun also, actually brought the idea of Humanistic Buddhism in Taiwan. But as we have seen 2 weeks ago, although the ideas or the thoughts of Humanistic Buddhism was carried from mainland China to Taiwan, especially in the personality of Venerable Ying Sun, but the developments of the 4 major mountains were, in one way or another, had their own contributory factors, had their own causes, which may not be, as many scholars believe, to have been influenced by Tai Shi's concept of Humanistic Buddhism. Let me share first. I got to share first the screen. I forgot to share the screen now. So we will continue with the Humanistic Buddhism that we were talking about. Since it was 2 weeks ago, perhaps we go back so that we have some ideas what we were talking about, then we continue. So 2 weeks ago, we started off with a discussion on Venerable Ying Sun, said to be a great proponent of Renjian Fojiao, although in English we simply use the word Humanistic Buddhism. Okay, Renjian Fojiao, and he is now acknowledged as one of the foremost Buddhist scholars on Renjian Fojiao, and many people try to tie with him, try to do whatever that they are doing, they try to say that it is a die to Renjian Poxiao. That was from Venerable Ying Sun. Then we talk about the four mountains. Of course, the biggest one today is Fort Guangshan, which has a university even in the United States of America, and with followers in all the 5 continents, which Venerable Srini is very proud of. But one thing I noticed, he might not be as popular as Thich Nhat Hanh in the West, mainly because Thich Nhat Hanh speaks English and French, whereas Srini could only speak in Chinese language. So the West is very much influenced by Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings and more familiar with him. But in terms of the Buddhist movement, I think Fort Guangshan is now one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Buddhist movement worldwide. Then you have the other one is the Dhammatram, which was founded by this meditation master, Venerable Shen Yue, also came from a place somewhere in Shanghai, somewhere near Shanghai, and he came over to Taiwan after the 1949 retreat of Chiang Kai-shek. Then he established the Bhaktali or Dhammatram in today's Taipei. And he has many followers also all over the world, including Malaysia, but perhaps less than Fort Guangshan. I'm not sure about it. Now, then you have the Shiji, the third mountain, which was founded by Venerable Zhen Yan, a nun, born in Taiwan. This is a charity organization founded by the Buddhist nuns, and is today, if you talk about the Buddhist charity work, it is about the biggest Buddhist charity organization in the world. Then, of course, we did not miss this Chong Temple, which is considered one of the 4 big mountains. The uniqueness of Chong Temple in our discussion on humanistic Buddhism is that Chong Temple actually did not claim to have anything to do with humanistic Buddhism. It claimed to be a lineage of meditation from Venerable Qing, from Venerable Qing. It's all about meditation. So from here we make a good comparison that the so-called humanistic that we see in Taiwan, for example, doing charity, social engagement, publishing magazines, education for the monks, building secular schools, all these which were done in the name of humanistic Buddhism was also done by Chong Tai, but not in the name of humanistic Buddhism. Then we went on to discuss about Venerable Chao Hui, and last week, 2 weeks ago, we had a very lively discussion on the controversial issues that she brought up. So we now from here, we will move on from here about Venerable Chao Hui. We move on from here. Her social engagement, very much socially engaged. So we listed here some of the episodes of social engagements that were connected to her. For example, when the Buddhist Institution Republic of China, this is in Taiwan, set up a committee or a unit to protect Buddhism, she was the leader and championed a number of issues, especially on films that were seen to be condemning Buddhism. Then she was also the founder president for Care for Life of the Republic of China, and pressured the Legislative Assembly to pass the Protection of Wildlife Law and Animal Protection Law. And then one big incident is the Kuan Yin refused to vote incident in 1994, in which she was actually the real leader who led this movement. And she was the one who actually sort of, I say, pressured Venerable Shingi to take actions. So Venerable Shingi subsequently agreed to send 300 buses of protesters to this place in Taipei, and so eventually pressed the government to compromise, and the issue was eventually settled. And again in 1999 to declare Vesak a public holiday, and then this was about the nunhood, where she insisted that the nunhood, which had disappeared in the Tibetan tradition and in the Theravada traditions, to be reinstated. And so when Dalai Lama visited Taiwan in the year 2001, she actually talked to the Dalai Lama and persuaded or pressured Dalai Lama to reinstate the nunhood. According to reports, Dalai Lama actually, in principle, agreed, but he said he would have to discuss with all the other lineages in Tibet, in the Tibetan traditions. Now, this is the case because in Buddhism we don't have a unitarily leader who could just make decisions like the Pope. Now we have to go by consensus. Then the next one was in 2001, the next day after the Dalai Lama's visit, at a conference to celebrate the 96th birthday of Ying Shun, she openly called for the abolishment of Garudharma and did a good stance by tearing away Garudharma to create a sensationalize the whole issue. So we were discussing 2 weeks ago, we were discussing all the 8 Garudharma, and we had a lively discussion whether all these on this issue of Garudharma. So just to repeat, the first one is a nun must pay respect to a monk, even though the monk could be much more junior than her. Then a nun must not spend the rain in the residence where there are no monks, and a nun must always get consent from the order of the monks for the religious ceremony of observance day and the exaltation days. Then, after the race retreat, a nun must invite both orders in respect of the 3 matters, namely what was seen, what was heard, what was suspected. Actually, it's sort of like inviting the monks to advise them. Then a bhikkhuni who has broken any vows of the respect must undergo penance for half a month under both sanghas. And then number 6, probation for 2 years, which is not applicable to the bhikkhu, but applicable to the bhikkhunis. Probation for 2 years before you get higher ordination. And a monk must not be abused or revealed in any way by a nun. And monks, admonition of monk by nun is forbidden. So, like we discussed 2 weeks ago, there are a lot of controversies regarding this Garudharma, and all this controversy is still on until today. Oh, I forgot to use my slideshow. Now, on the controversies of this Garudharma, the controversy is number 1. How authentic is the Garudharma? How authentic is it? There are 2 arguments here. Some people say the rule of respect was made by the Buddha. Okay, and so when the controversies started in Taiwan by Venerable Zhao Hui, and Zhao Hui being always claimed to be a student of Ying Shun, a direct student of Ying Shun. So the Republic of China, Buddhist Association of Republic of China actually wrote to Ying Sun to ask him to clarify what was his stand. And Ying Sun actually replied in very brief that the rule of respect was made by the Buddha. So that stand taken by Ying Sun actually upset all those people who wanted to upset some people, including Chao Hui, because Chao Hui is the one who claimed that this is a later edition, not genuinely from the Buddha. And we shall see later some of the arguments. This is just for scholarly argument. Scholars like to argue, and they always pick up this thing and that things to argue. So we will talk about this later, a little bit later. Then another issue is supposing we assume that the rule of respect was authentic, that means it came from the Buddha. Is it applicable today? This is another issue. Is it applicable today? And if it is applicable, how can it be modified or amended to suit the needs of today? So this is another school of thought now. Okay, assuming it is the Garudharma was enacted by the Buddha, some would like to argue that it still can be abolished because the Buddha, just before Mahaparinibbana, did tell Ananda that any minor rules that does not, there are minor rules that could be abolished. So the Vinaya rules were not meant to be static, something that could not be modified at all or abolished. So there's one school who argue that it could be abolished. Another school who think that we have to change according to time. Even if it was enacted by the Buddha, we must know how to adapt it, modify it, amend it, whatever it is, to suit the needs of today. To support the argument that the rule of respect was later addition, there are some scholars who came up with some of the arguments. And actually, if you really go deep into it, it's a very lengthy academic exercise. So I listed some, just a few of the reasons why they say the rule of respect was a later addition. For example, the Vinaya state that the Buddha gave bhikkhus the right to ordain bhikkhunis on their own, because it was reported that the Buddha said, "Bhikkhus, I allow you to ordain bhikkhunis." And this was used to ordain the 500 women accompanying Mahapajapati Gautami. Yet, you find that in the Garudharma, it says that the bhikkhunis must be ordained by the bhikkhuni sangha first. By the bhikkhuni sangha first, and by bhikkhunis who have been novices for 2 rainy seasons first. I need to say in the Garudharma, it's mentioned that ordination must be done by the bhikkhunis first. But you know, when the Buddha ordained Mahapajapati Gautami, there was no bhikkhunis. Sorry, there was no bhikkhuni sangha. So it looks like there's a contradiction. So definitely the first one, Mahapajapati Gautami, when she was admitted, it was just a simple admission, which the Buddha, similar to what the Buddha did to the bhikkhus. When the Buddha admitted the bhikkhus at the beginning, the 5 bhikkhus, there was no ceremony, there was no sangha at that time. The Buddha just mentioned to the 5 ascetics who were his friends, come, O bhikkhus, ehi bhikkhus, just come, O bhikkhus. So the Buddha did the same thing when he admitted Mahapajapati Gautami, come, ehi bhikkhuni, Mahapajapati Gautami to come in. So how is it that this Garudharma mentioned about ordination for that it must be done by the order of the bhikkhunis first? So this was mentioned here. The Pali Canon has an ehi ordination. It's mentioned in the Pali Canon that there was one bhikkhuni, Bhada Pudalas. She was admitted just by the word ehi, means come. Okay. So, and The Vinaya in the Pali Canon, there is no mention of the Garudamas as part of the ordination procedure. So when scholars try to compare, and they say, how come you talk about Garudama, but in the Pali Canon, in the Vinaya of the Pali Canon, there was no mention of these procedures. Okay, so these are just some of the arguments for us to share about. And this Dhammananda Bhikkhuni, Dhammananda, she's a professor of Buddhism in the university. Before she ordained her, she got herself ordained as a nun. First, would be say the first nun in Thailand. She said, nuns at the time of the Buddha had equal rights and equal share in everything. In one case, 8 robes were offered to both sanghas at a place where there was only 1 nun and 4 monks. The Buddha divided the robes in half, giving 4 to the nuns and 4 to the monks, because the robes were for both sanghas and had to be divided equally, however many were in each group. See? Because the nuns tended to receive fewer invitations to lay people's homes, the Buddha had all offerings brought to the monastery and equally divided between the 2 sanghas. He protected the nuns and one was fair to both parties. There are subordinate in the sense of being younger sister and elder brothers, not in the sense of being masters as slaves. So from here, from Dhammananda's presentation, we notice that during the time of the Buddha was very fair, or rather was trying to take care of the nuns, because in that society, a male dominant society, nuns usually have less invitation for dana and less for everything. So whatever received that was given to the sangha, the Buddha would divide between the bhikkhu sangha and the bhikkhuni sangha equally, so that the nuns would also be taken care of. So in that sense, it was a very fair treatment to the bhikkhunis. So now we have to talk about moving from Garudama, we talk about the ordination of nuns. Because in Humanistic Buddhism, one of the ramifications is the advocacy for organizations and participation. Now, especially for the females. Then, but since the ordination of nun had discontinued in the Theravada and Mahayana Theravada and Tibetan traditions, there was a movement that tried to promote the welfare of the female. So we have this Sakyarita International Association of Buddhist Women, which was founded in 1987. This movement is perhaps the foremost Buddhist women movement in the world. They organize a conference once every 2 years, I think, and conferences have been held in Bulgaria, Sri Lanka, Malaya, Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Japan, Taiwan, and so on. So to create greater awareness on the rights and needs of the female, and mainly to allow for ordination of nuns. We have to briefly know the history. The ordination of nuns in the Theravada and Tibetan tradition actually died off around the 8th century AD in India. Okay, in India, around 8th century AD already died off, and then around 11 AD in Sri Lanka. And once died off, some people argue that you cannot revive it. Now in Thailand, in 1928, the Supreme Patriarch of Thailand, responding to the attempted ordination of 2 women, issued an edict that monks must not ordain women as samaneris, sikkamanas, or bhikkhunis. 2 women were reportedly arrested and jailed briefly. But this may not be true, because I think they only attempted to become nuns, but did not succeed. That shows that in Thailand, where there was no nuns, there was a very strict enforcement that they should not simply ordain the females as bhikkhunis. Then in 1996, through the efforts of Sakyarita International Association of Buddhist Women, the Theravada Bhikkhuni was revived when 11 Sri Lankan women received full ordination in Sarnath, India. Okay. Since in Sri Lanka, they said the Bhikkhuni order has died off, and some schools believe that, some school of thought believe that since it's already died off, you cannot just revive it like that, because ordination requires the presence of the Bhikkhu Sangha and the Bhikkhuni Sangha. And in Sri Lanka now, you only have Bhikkhu Sangha, you don't have Bhikkhuni Sangha. So without Bhikkhuni Sangha, you cannot have a legitimate ordination of Bhikkhunis. So this International Association of Buddhist Women came out with a very indigenous idea, not really indigenous, but just an idea that then we get the nuns from the Mahayana traditions. The Bhikkhuni order still survive in the Mahayana traditions, still survive in Korea and in China. So they got hold of Chinese nuns to form the Bhikkhuni Sangha to conduct the ordinations. Now, so Sri Lankan Buddhist chapters have to adopt the one eye closed policy, meaning to say they did not agree, but neither could they do anything about it. So it just happened like that. Okay. Now, just now, the professor I mentioned to you, actually, she came to Malaysia when she was a lay lady, and I met her a few times. A very learned professor. And if you say, you know, lay people cannot teach monks and nuns, actually, she was a professor of Buddhist studies, and she was teaching monks, and she was a lady some more. So not only lay people, but lay ladies can also were already teaching Buddhism to monks. So in 2003, Dhammananda Bhikkhuni, professor of Buddhist philosophy, known as Chatsuman Kapil Singh, ordained as the first novice and then a Bhikkhuni in Sri Lanka upon the revival of the full ordination of women there. So today, Professor Dhammananda Bhikkhuni stay in Bangkok, still propagating Buddhism there, doing very fine work, especially for the underprivileged, for the women folk. But she is not officially recognized by the Thai Sangha. As far as the Thai Sangha is concerned, the Thai Sangha actually just keep one eye closed, saying that she is not following our Thai tradition. She is following the Sri Lanka tradition. Okay, so she's so one eye closed. I think Buddhists are clever enough to solve their problems. Okay. So the controversy still go on whether we can ordain nuns without the presence of a Bhikkhuni Sangha. This venerable here, Venerable Thanisaro Bhikkhu, Venerable Thanisaro, well-known Buddhist scholar from the USA, he is of the opinion that the lineage has stopped and you cannot just simply revive it. You must respect the rule. So you want to know more about what his arguments are, you can read 100 pages of his argument. You can Google Thanisaro and then you just put Garudama at the back. I think you will be able to get a few 100 pages of argument why we should not just revive it like that. One of his contention, of course, was to simplify that the lineage has stopped. When you stop, you should not just simply revive it. If that is the case, there will be no respect for rules. You can do anything with it, and then therefore the Vinaya rules will become useless. So that is his argument. His argument was in fact a great debate with Venerable Analoya. This is the Venerable. He is a German. He's from German. Venerable Analoya gave his argument. But the Bhikkhu Sangha alone can start the ordination. His argument is like that. His argument is the Bhikkhu Sangha alone can start the ordination. And he gave the example when Mahapajapati Gautama came in, there was no Bhikkhuni Sangha. So what are you talking about? The Buddha ordained Mahapajapati Gautami. And then later on, the so-called 500 followers of Mahapajapati Gautami came in. There was also no Bhikkhuni Sangha. It was ordained by the Buddha and his Sangha, by the Bhikkhu Sangha. So it was already a practice in the past. Of course, Venerable Thanisaro countered him, saying that this rule was later changed. That when the Bhikkhuni Sangha was formed, then the rule was enacted that you must get ordination from both sides. That means the Bhikkhuni Sangha and the Bhikkhu Sangha. And you cannot just. So when this new practice came in, the old practice already automatically resigned, automatically annihilated, automatically removed. So that was his argument. So both of them, you can see the argument to and fro in the internet. They have been arguing this. There's another monk, Achan Brahmabangso. I mentioned him because he's pretty well known in Malaysia and in Australia. He is from the Thai Buddhist tradition, and he ordained nuns in Australia. And because of that, the Thai Sangha actually expelled him. That means to say he's no more belonging to the Thai Sangha. He actually expelled him. And he actually wrote some articles about his support for the revival of the nunhood or ordination for nuns. And one of his papers that was supposed to be presented in a seminar in Vietnam was actually rejected. So you can see some of the forces that were against the reenaction of the nunhood. So today, what happened is in Sri Lanka, you have Dasa Silmata or the 10 preceptors. Then in Burma, we call them the Tilasin. They wear normally pink robe. And then the Machi in Thai Buddhism. These are 10 preceptors. So they are not officially, they are not nuns. So they are in a very like I say something like in the twilight zones, you know. They are not lay people, neither are they monastics. Somewhere in between. But this is actually not new because in Sri Lanka, like we know Anagarika Navapala, he was something like that in between. That means you are actually, officially speaking, you are still a lay person, as long as you did not receive the full ordination. But you do not live a lay life. Because a lot of them, the Dasa Sil, Master, the Tilasin, the Maichi, they are dependent on the public support for their daily living. So this is the situation now for the nunhood. Okay? We are still talking about Venerable Chow Hui, her work on her insistence on reviving, on the abolishing the Karudama and the revival of the nunhood. Then another great thing that she has done was to officiate a lesbian marriage in 2012. Now this, of course, until today, there are still controversies on lesbian relationship, and you can see that actually even among the Buddhist leaders, there are differing opinions. For example, this one is just another of her work on gender inclusiveness. So I was saying, Buddhist leaders are still divided on these LGBT issues. So if you are in USA, you must be aware of the Shuanghua's city of 10,000 Buddhas in California. And Venerable Shuanghua already passed away. He was dead against LGBT issues, saying that it's very unnatural. Then you have some of the leaders today who we are not very clear. Sometimes they seem to be supportive of the LGBT, sometimes they seem to be against. So like Dalai Lama, sometimes I think he is wavering. At first he was against, then when he met the leaders of the LGBT in USA, after listening to them, he seemed to be acceptable to the idea of LGBT. So this is an issue which is not very clear. So now I want to just go back to the history, just to relate some stories so that we are aware of the situation during the Buddha's times. Now, all of you are aware of the stories that I have told you during our first lecture, the story of Bhaktali. Okay? This Bhaktali became a monk just because he was attracted to the physical body of the Buddha. So he would come to the Buddha daily, sit in front of the Buddha, and just gaze at the Buddha and enjoy himself looking at the Buddha. So one day when the Buddha noticed, the Buddha said, "Bhaktali, what are you looking at?" Then Bhaktali said, "One day, sir, when I look at your body, so beautiful, so nice, I really enjoy it. It gives me so much pleasure." Then, of course, the Buddha then admonished him, "Bhoko Bhaktali. So dhammam pasati, so mam pasati." So if you see the Dhamma, then you see me. And if you see me, then you see the Dhamma. So this was how that verse, "Those who sees the Dhamma sees me," came in. So the last time I told you the story and I ended there. But actually this story continued. Bhaktali, after some time, the Buddha left and he could not see the Buddha. So he was so upset that he actually went to a cliff and attempted suicide. The story has it that Buddha actually came in time and saved him. And thereafter, the Buddha preached to him, and he eventually gained some enlightenment. I don't know what degree, I can't remember. Now, from this story, you will notice that actually Bhaktali must have some kind of a special sexual orientation. He's a male, but he's attracted to another male. Okay, so I suspected that he must be in the LGBT group. But the interesting thing is, despite that, he was still in the monkhood. Okay. Then we have the story of Surya. In the Dhammapada verse, Dhammapada, all of you are aware of this Dhammapada collection of Buddha saying. There is this a verse that says, "Neither mother nor father could do this, nor other relatives beside. Thoughts well directed could do this far better. Only our thoughts well directed could do this better." To do this means reduce the affection, the attachment. Okay. How this verse come about? There's a story about this man Surya. This man Surya, he was a man, quite a wealthy man, married, and with two children, two sons. So one day, he and his friends went together to take a bath in the river. So they went together, and on the way, he saw a monk, Mahakachanya. He saw a monk. And when he saw the monk who was very, with his skin glowing, very shiny. So lust appeared in his mind. He was attracted to that monk. He was attracted to that monk, and he wished that he could be with that monk, or at least my wife's complexion should be like that monk. And on that thought, he actually was transformed to become a woman. And after notice that he himself had transformed to become a woman, he was very upset and surprised and shocked. So he escaped from all his friends and followed a caravan to another city. So when he went to that city, the caravan people took him along, and then the caravan people thought, this woman, now Soraya is a woman, if we could surrender her to our master, we could get quite a good income or reward. So when they reached the city, they surrendered this woman, Soraya, to the master of the caravan. And this Soraya was married to this master of the caravan. And after marriage, she bore 2 sons. This time she bore another 2 sons. So she was living there with a new husband now, and the 2 sons, and the children grown up. Then one day, while she was looking out from her windows, she noticed her old companions, who was supposed to be taking bath together with him or her, passing by. So she invited that man to the house and offer dana and offer food and just to inquire about her old past, inquire about that man Soraya who had 2 sons. How were the 2 sons doing, and how was the wife doing? How was the Soraya's parent doing, and things like that. So this companion, who could not recognize him now, was surprised. How is it that you know them so well, and who are you? Then Soraya, this woman, finally admitted to the companion that actually I was the Soraya, the man. After I came here, I was transformed to become a woman. After I became a woman, I lived here, and I have already had 2 sons here. But I feel shameful because I had that lustful thought for that monk, Mahakachanya. Then after that, he said, I would like to invite that monks for a dana. So the arrangement was made for that monk to come for dana. After offering dana, then she confessed that she had the wrong thought. He at that time had the wrong thought, and asked the monk for forgiveness. Okay, so the monk said, "Okay, I forgive you." After forgiving her, now she is transformed back to a man. So after she transformed back to the man, then her husband said, "It's okay. We can still live together. We can take care of our 2 children." Then Soraya said, "No, I have been a man. I bore 2 sons. Then I became a woman. I had another 2 sons. Now I'm back to be a man again. I feel really shameful for myself. I think I want to live this household life to become a monk." So he was accepted as a monk. So he became a monk. And after he became a monk, people always come and tease him. Now you have 2 sons who was whom you fathered them, and you have another 2 sons whom you mothered them. Now, which 2 sons you have the most affection? Then she will say, well, the one that born from my womb, I would have more affections. So she said like that. But after some time, after his constant practice, he became enlightened. He became an arahant. After he became enlightened, then when people ask him again, which 2 sons you love the most? Then he said, neither. Now I have no affection for anyone. Then this was reported to the Buddha. Some of the people would tell the Buddha, you see this man, last time he said he has affection for the children born from the mother's womb. Now he said he had no affection for either one. He must be telling a lie, isn't it? Either one must be a lie. Then the Buddha said no, he was not telling a lie. After his enlightenment, he has reached the stage where he had no attachment or affection for any particular person. Then the Buddha uttered these verses. Okay, where are the verses? Disappear already. Here. Neither mother nor father could do this. So now you look at these stories. Do you believe it? It's very interesting. Do you believe in these stories? If this story is not true, how is it that we have this Dhammapada verse? And it's well recorded. Well, I would imagine it might be true because these are bisexual people. But whether it was an instant change from male to female or female to male, that might be just certain ingredients we added into our stories to make it more interesting. But there's a possibility that he or she was a bisexual. And there are these bisexual people today we call she-male, actually exist even today. So it would be interesting for us to know, during the time of the Buddha, how we look at the sexes. Today, when we are given a form, we are always given, you have to pick either male or female, isn't it? There's no 3rd category or 4th category. But in ancient India, there were already 4 categories of sexes. You have the Upato Baijanaka, the Pandaka, the male, and the female. There were 4 sexes recorded. This was recorded at that time. Now, some of you might be surprised. 4 sexes. Well, in the West, we are used to dualistic thinking. Dualistic, bad, good, black and white, either this or that. So we are used to that kind of dualistic thinking. And Professor David, said this is very strong because of within the Abrahamic religion. Within the Abrahamic religions, either you believe in God or you believe in Satan. Either you go to heaven or you go to hell. This is the kind of dualistic thinking very prevalent in the West. That does not mean that in the East we don't have. In the East also we have the same dualistic thinking. But in the East, there is a tendency for not dualistic but quadratistic. That means a 4 system of logics. So if you ask a Chinaman, yes or no, sometimes he will give you the answer, finally you couldn't get his answer. So his answer is neither yes nor no. Sometimes he will the answer in he thought in such a way that you will have to figure out, I think it's yes and no. So that's why you say the Indian system of logic and the Chinese system of logic, sometimes they do not categorically say yes or no, or black or white. That's why you see the Chinese symbol of yin yang. The Chinese symbol of yin yang. I draw for you. Can you see the Chinese symbol of India? Chinese symbol of India. You see the Chinese symbol of India? There's a small dot here, and it's very important. It means to say within the yin, there is some yang, or within the female, there is some male, or within the male, there is some female. That means there is a four system of logic in Chinese belief, and that also same for the Indian system of thought. So because of that, it's not surprising at all that they actually recognize that there were four sexes. Upato Baijanaka actually refers to bisexual, people with both sex characteristics. Of course, today scholars try to figure out whether we are talking about sexual orientation or the physical body, you know. But if in my own this Upato Baijanaka refers to today we call female, means they have both the male and the female features in their body. It means they can become male, they can also become female. And these are some of these people already there. And then you have the Pandaka. Pandaka means Pandaka literal meaning means no egg, EGG, no egg. Pandaka means how shall I say? No sexes, no prominent sexes. Some translated it as eunuch. It means sexes are removed. But from here we can see it means male, female, both male and female, neither male nor female. There were four sexes in the time of the Buddha. It was recorded that way that they recognized the society had such people. And there was a Vinaya rules. Vinaya rules 85, 86 that forbidden ordination of Pandaka with extreme uncontrollable sexual lust. There is a Vinaya rule that forbids the ordination of Pandaka. And for this, Pandaka, or in Chinese they call it Huangwen. Now for this, some people say this is discrimination. But we must understand how this came about. There was this monk, okay, that means considered male, but he actually is a Pandaka. Okay, he became a monk, but he was very lustful. He wanted to have sex with the other monks. When the other monks refused, then he went and had sex with a lay person, an animal keeper, and that lay person told the stories, and so the public came to know. So the Buddha, on investigation, then the Buddha from then on forbid Pandaka from becoming monks. And some people argue that it is not fair. It is not respecting human rights. Why Upato Baijanaka or Pandaka, they also could become, they also could gain enlightenment. Why should not they become monastics? But my argument is very simple. The Bhikkhu Sangha is for the male, and this one is not male. So how can you mix them into the male community? It's as simple as that. It's not about human rights. Okay. It's just like in the rules, if you suffer from certain diseases or you are too old, you also could not be allowed to be ordained as monks or nuns. These were also some measures that were enacted at that time. It's not about discrimination. It's about protecting the purity and the pristineness of the Sangha. Okay. Okay. So Venerable Chao Hui led us to discuss a number of issues related to nuns and nunhood, to gender inclusiveness. And then we now have to discuss a little bit about her involvement in her attitude to politics. Because as we say, she was very much involved in issues that today we call politics. But she openly condemned Venerable Wei Jie of Chong for taking sides in elections. As I told you earlier, the Venerable Wei Jie of Chong actually she was an army. He was a soldier in the Kuomintang party when they retreated to Taiwan. And after his retirement from the army, he became a monk. And later on became famous and built the Chong ship. So his loyalty was very much towards Kuomintang. And he actually openly supported Kuomintang, so much so that people held demonstration in front of his temple. So Venerable Chao Hui condemned him for taking sides in the elections. But Venerable Chao Hui, however, later openly supported the Green Party. It's a small party in Taiwan. And Venerable Chao Hui's argument was the big parties, like the People's Progressive Party and the Kuomintang, they are now controlled by big corporations, rich people, capitalists. So she supported the Green Party instead. But for me, I would not do that. So although she's my good friend, sometimes I disagree with her. And she admitted that she was offered to be the deputy governor of the Nantou district, but she refused because I think this part I agree with her. Okay. Her point was religion and politics should be separated. That does not mean that the monastic should be completely out of political activities. This part I also could agree with her. Now, monastics are also citizens. Therefore, they have the right to be involved in politics. They are not second-class citizens. They have no reason to forego their rights. So she was herself involved in many social issues, but in as far as getting political power is concerned, she refused political powers. Venerable Chao Hui, her active involvement in this social engagement, I think at times brought her a lot of agony rather than happiness. We Buddhists always talk about happiness, but if you are dealing with a lot of social issues that you find it so difficult to handle at times, wouldn't that become an agony? I look at it, a lot of politicians, let's say like Nelson Mandela, when he was put in the jail for 27 years in the prison, you think he was very happy in the prison? I don't think so. I think there must have been a lot of agony in him. And how these people manage to survive? There must be some kind of inner strength. And Venerable Chao Hui mentioned her strength. Having passed through care for academic study, care for the religion, and care for all sentient beings, her three cares, 關懷, 三種關懷, 學術關懷, 佛法的關懷, 眾生的關懷, academic study, religion, and sentient beings. Chao Hui's source of strength comes from her study and practice of the Buddha teachings, particularly her deep appreciation of the Dharma. So her strength came from the appreciation of the Dharma. She said, I sincerely hope the value of our care for the religion and all sentient beings is not evaluated by the applause or abuse we received, but evaluated based on our reflection and practice of the teaching, and carry on boldly without a care for praise or blame. So I think this offered a lot of strength, because when you handle such issues, you are bound to be abused. Of course, there will be people who clap hands and cheer you on, but there will be people who abuse her. And in fact, if you look at some of the abuse on her, they were very abusive, vulgar words and all sorts of words were thrown on her. And if you are a normal being, having received such abuses or received such applause or claps, you might be carried away, you know. But if you stick on the reflection on the practice of the teachings, then you will not be carried away. Okay? So she actually reported to Venerable Yin Shun. Actually, Venerable Yin Shun something like asked her. Venerable Yin Shun sort of asked her, what makes you carry on with all these activities? And Yin Shun, and she reported this way: studying Buddhism in the monastery, I knew about Bodhisattva and knew about Mahayana as well. However, when confronted with the unsatisfactoriness of life and the infinite number of living beings, I felt rather hopeless. And I think this is what a lot of us encounter at times. Sometimes we say, oh, we are Buddhists, we want to do this and we want to do that. But sometimes you look at the number of beings that you vow to save, or the what do you call the dukkha that the world is undergoing, you will feel helpless. And she continued. It was only after I was engaged in protecting Buddhism and protecting sentient beings that I felt a continuous flow of energy into my life and felt the result that arose from joint vows and actions that changed collective karma. Then only I could state affirmatively that there is such a thing as Bodhisattva path, a path that we could tread on. Now, this is very interesting. When you are engaged in protecting the Dhamma and protecting sentient beings, you actually feel the flow of energy into your life. So if you ask Master Jiu, why is he so engaged in promoting Buddhism in USA? Probably because by doing so, he actually feel a lot of energy into his life, you know, and carry on with more and more of his work. Okay. So it's the same thing for you. If you do more, probably you feel more energy coming into you. You look at all the politicians, you know, they are all 70 plus, you know, but they are still very active because there's a lot of energy flowing into them because they cherish what they are doing. Okay? Your president will be around 74, 79. You know, my former prime minister, he was 95. So because of him, we dare not retire. We dare not talk about retirement. Okay, I think we have some more discussion topic about this one, but I think the time is up, right? So we take a pause now, and we'll come back and do some discussion on general discussion on humanistic.
Yep.
Okay, shall we continue?
Sure.
Any topic you would like to bring up for discussion following our presentation earlier just now? Is there anyone who would like to bring up some topic of discussion? Okay. If not, I will continue. We now would like to discuss a few things about humanistic Buddhism in Taiwan. As discussed earlier, we talked about the Four Mountains and the two iconic personalities, Venerable Ying Sun and Venerable Chao Hui. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, when we were talking about Taiwan, why it is so important to talk about Taiwan was mainly because it is supposedly the home to humanistic Buddhism. And now our discussion will be focusing on the first topic is why? What are the causes that make Taiwan the home to humanistic Buddhism? What are the causes? So there are a number of scholars who have done study to understand why this phenomenon of humanistic Buddhism arises in Taiwan. Number one is actually the economic factors. Two scholars, one from Taiwan and one from mainland China, both identified this as number one, external factors. After the 1970s, Taiwan's economy developed very rapidly. And the economy of temples benefited from this economic growth. And by contrast, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and Cultural Revolution plus communism hindered economic development in the mainland. When Chiang Kai-shek's forces retreated to Taiwan in 1949, from 1949 onwards until around 1963 or 64, Taiwan actually was a recipient of financial aids and many other aids, including military aids from USA. and it was an agricultural economy. So Taiwan was economically not well off at that time. It was a recipient of financial and military aid from USA. But after 1965, Taiwan began to move to industrialization with more emphasis on manufacturing. And its economy picked up very fast, especially around the 1970 onwards. And after about 1970, Taiwan had actually shaped its path of being an agricultural economy and became an industrialized economy. And with that, the economy of Taiwan picked up very fast. And by 1980s, Taiwan, together with Hong Kong, Korea, and Singapore, were called the little dragons of Asia. They were the economic power of Asia at around 1980 onwards. Well, some literature put them as four little tigers. I think it is wrong because there were no tigers in these four areas. No, tigers are not native to these four lands, but all these four areas had something in common, and that is Buddhism and Confucianism, which is usually symbolized by dragon. So to more appropriate to call it the four little dragons. So with that economic growth, Taiwan actually globalized. And by 1980s, 90s, they have already started moving out of Taiwan and investing all over the world. And today, Taiwan's investment in China is equivalent to its investment in the whole of Southeast Asia. So this economic growth is one of the major factors that motivated or make the humanistic Buddhism able to grow so fast. By contrast, in the mainland, 1949 onwards, immediately after the war, China, with its great amount of poverty and people dying of hunger, there was actually no time for anything else. And with the wars in Korea, a lot of resources were diverted to Korea to fight the wars in Korea. So economically very much more backward. And it was not, then later on, after the Korean War, you have since 1960 onwards, the Vietnam War. Again, China was supporting North Vietnam and all the Viet Cong from the south, from the north. And these two wars actually hindered its economic growth. Plus, later on, you have the Mao Zedong's cultural revolutions that lasted about 10 years that devastated practically almost everything in China. Traditional cultures, temples, whatever things that were associated with the past were destroyed. And all this hindered economic growth in China. And it was only after Deng Xiaoping's reformation in the 1980s that China's economy picked up very fast. And with that, more religious freedom also allowed. And therefore, today we also witness some growth of Buddhism in China, mainland China. This scholar mentioned one particular thing about the economic factor, the rise of global market economy through multifaceted competition. Humanistic Buddhism is actually a reflection of this global trend whereby some within the region first encountered and passively reacted to this drastic social change and gradually changed to act on it actively, and further using its own theoretical superiority and practical simplicity to attract followers, and using these advantages to influence the transformation of Buddhism. The key factor here is the rise of global market economy. When the global market economy influenced Taiwan. At first, Buddhism in Taiwan encountered this globalized economies. And at first, they could not do much. They just, we call it reacted passively, meaning to say, whatever benefits or financial benefits from these globalizations, they just accept it. They just accept. A lot of donations comes in, we accept. Okay, but first, after that, it changed to act on globalizations because we have our own theoretical superiority in terms of the teachings of the Buddha and technology and means. So by that means Buddhism begin to globalize. So you see in the 1980 onwards, Guangsan moved out of Taiwan. Before that, Guangsan was very much limited into just mainland Taiwan. But but with the economic globalizations, many Taiwanese businessmen moved all over the world. So Guangsan moved to USA. One of the earliest is the USA, and then to the Southeast Asia, especially like Malaysia, Singapore, and then to Australia, and then much later to South America, and then Africa. All this due to globalized economy. Same thing for Tzu Chi. Tzu Chi took advantage of this globalization, economic globalizations, to move out of Taiwan to globalize Buddhism in the world. So you notice, I give you an example. The Tzu Chi in Malaysia was founded by a businessman, an investor from Taiwan. He came to Malaysia in the small town of Malacca, where he invested in textile factories. But soon after, he converted his textile factories to become a Tzu Chi center. So, in fact, today, a lot of Tzu Chi centers all around the world are led by Taiwanese. Even though local people were involved, but the final authority must come from Taiwan or from the Taiwanese. This is unlike Guangsan, which is more localized. Okay? Dhammadram also same. Dhammadram also moved to Malaysia. All this because of the globalized economy. Their businessmen came and brought along their religious belief and support. Now, of course, there's a second reason. First reason is economy. Second reason is political. The international political order, the withdrawal, both scholars, the name I written in Chinese at the bottom there. The withdrawal of the USA from Taiwan weakened the hitherto strong Christian influence. Christian influence was at one time very strong in Taiwan. Chiang Kai-shek was a Methodist. He converted to Christianity after he married his second wife, Song Mei-ling. Okay? Song Mei-ling came from an aristocratic family. The parents were also educated. Song Mei-ling's parents were also educated in the West, and they were bankers. So this very powerful family. Song Mei-ling's brothers served as ministers in the People's Republic of in the Republic of China, headed by Chiang Kai-shek. So Chiang Kai-shek married Song Mei-ling, a member of a very powerful family, and Song Mei-ling, being a very staunch Christian, actually tried to promote Christianity in one way or another, a bit subtly, because in Taiwan, basically they adopted a constitution of secular constitution, no religion to be supported, but they tried to do it in other ways. For example, they declared 25th of December, Christmas Day, as a constitutional day, actually to celebrate Christmas. But since you cannot have a religious holiday, you call it a constitutional day. I think hardly any country in the world use the word constitutional day, but you put your constitutional day on 25th of December, then you can celebrate Christmas. And like if you have heard from Reverend Shini, she make life difficult for Buddhism. So Buddhist practices, Buddhist preachers going around to face difficulties, harassment from the police and things like that. And but with the withdrawal, and then another thing is American aid always come with the churches from behind. So the churches became very powerful and influenced some of the people. But after the Americans began withdrawal from Taiwan in 1965, so this influence waned and provided a vacuum for the Buddhism to grow. The third factors, I would call it a social factor. Just now we talked about economy factor, the political factor, then we talk about the social, the event of civil society, religious needs of the people. As the society changed now from agricultural society to an industrialized society. So now there is we call it the market economy. Today's market economy, where in a market economy, there are a lot of uncertainties. It's a huge and complex market, and a lot of people would face a lot of uncertainty, anxiety, and so on. So it's created a need for a religion. So this is very much like the same as during the Tang Dynasty or earlier, when the people doing business in the Western territories, each time they wanted to go, they would make a vow at say the Mo Kao Pu in Tunbang, that if I'm successful in this business, when I return, I would like to make a Buddha image here, something like that. So similar trend also you can find in Taiwan during this time of the rise of market economy. So when you want to make an investment, sometimes you go and consult banks whether this is a worthwhile investment, and sometimes you make a wish in front of Kuan Yin. If I make a big park, then I will build you a bigger temple and things like that. So this is a kind of religious need arising from the advent of the civil society or market economy. Okay, some of this already explained. So the last part is just a conclusion. So from the social perspective, Humanistic Buddhism is in Taiwan grow prominent due to the religious needs of Taiwanese under the political, economic, and the social or cultural mega trends. So these were the external factors that contributed to the growth of Humanistic Buddhism in Taiwan. So this question will probably will arise in your examination. Okay, causes, we have to talk about the internal factors also. If we just talk about external factors, the same external factors apply to, say, Taoism in Taiwan. But Taoism did not grow. It is growing, you cannot deny that, but it did not grow as much as like, say, Buddhism. So there must be some internal strength or some internal factors within Buddhism. A lot of scholars say it was influenced by the thinking of Tai Chi and Ying Shun. A lot of scholars say that. But as I have presented to you in our earlier discussions, this may be more of a motto used for the modernization of Chinese Buddhism. The word Humanistic Buddhism or Renjian Fojiao is very much more attractive than, say, let's chant Amitofo. You know, so in a movement, you sometimes need a catchy slogan, and so whatever you do, you try to put it under that catchy slogan. That will make it more effective. So the word Humanistic Buddhism sounds very modern, sounds more down to earth, more attractive to the people. So we say humanistic Buddhism, the term was more of like a slogan. So what are the real internal causes? What are the real internal causes? So the real internal causes, these are my own findings. You probably can't find it in the Google or any scholars' articles. Many scholars would say it's because of Tai Chi and Yin Sun, because of their Renjian Forjia's teachings. No doubt I acknowledge their influence were there, but I think it's more of other internal factors. Number one is the traditional cultural background of Buddhism. Although Buddhism suffered corruption, deterioration during the Qing Dynasty and the Republican period, right up to 1949, the 2,000-year-old cultural foundation was still strong enough to withstand the onslaught of such deterioration. So when confronted with the challenges of modernization, it was able to resort to its traditional teaching, such as meditation and Zen, and to the higher order of the Buddha to adapt or to counter such challenges. What I try to say is, although Buddhism deteriorated during the Qing Dynasty, nonetheless, Buddhism still had a good foundation in some of its teachings, for example, Zen or meditation. And some of the original teachings of the Buddha were still there. And so, this is the cultural roots. For example, practicing of dana was taught in China for 2,000 years. And this is still part of the Chinese culture. And so this kind of cultural strength is still within the Chinese community, which is associated with Buddhism. So when we are confronted with modernization, then Buddhism would fall, then the Buddhist leaders would fall back to the teachings. For example, if we are faced with certain uncertainties, like we mentioned earlier, when we are doing business, then maybe we calm down ourselves. We say, yeah, there's something in Buddhism called meditation. So we practice meditation. So this cultural background is a very strong internal factors that provided the food for the growth of humanistic Buddhism. Furthermore, when we talk about modernization from agriculture to industrialized, from rural to cities, and from yearning for a simple agricultural life, now yearn for a material well-being. And then in terms of thinking and body of knowledge, we go for rationality. And then from the feudalistic society to a democratic society, rejection of authority, and then the fierce competitions, all these are elements of modernization. And Buddhism has to modernize to meet these new demands. So in order to meet this demand, Buddhism had to move from the monastic to lay life, from forests to cities, from temples to society. And all these, Buddhism finds support. Everyone can find support in the practice of meditation and the original humanistic teachings of the Buddha. Okay. Another factor is, second internal factor, I would say, is the identification with Buddhism. Despite the deterioration of Buddhism, most Chinese, by tradition and culture, identify themselves as Buddhists. Ironically, the rites and rituals condemned by Taishu actually provided this life force. This identity provided a ready human and financial resources for renaissance of Buddhism. What I'm trying to say is this identification with Buddhism, identifying yourself as a Buddhist, is a very strong internal factor. Despite the fact of all the deterioration that had set in Chinese Buddhism, most Chinese would identify themselves as Buddhists. How they identify themselves as Buddhists? Through all the rites and rituals that they perform. Okay? whether it's praying for going to heaven or appeasing the ghosts, which Tai Chi condemned, that rituals actually provided the life force, that identification in Buddhism. So despite all those elements being ridiculed by Tai Chi and some scholars, those elements actually provided the life force for Buddhism to sustain to this day. As I mentioned earlier, there are 5 aspects of a religion: the founder, the teachings, okay, the church or the organization, then the what you call the educational aspect, how the teachings are transmitted, and the last one is the rites and rituals, of religions. So usually the first 4 would have died off. People would have forgotten. For example, in Taoism, you ask a Taoist, they wouldn't they would not know who is their founder. Okay? And you ask, have you read a Taoist text? No, nobody have ever read. Okay, and then of course, then Taoist temples are very disorganized. Every temple is by its own, so most of the things are gone. But Taoism survived because when Chinese die, they still go for a Taoist monk to perform the rites and rituals. The same thing, Buddhism survived because they were rites and rituals. So this identification becomes important at the most critical moment because it provided a ready human and financial resources. Because all these people that identify themselves as Buddhists. So when Fo Guangshan want to build temples or Sisi want to do charities, all these people whom we say are not Buddhists in the quote and unquote, are actually identifying themselves as Buddhists and came forward to support. And if they make big money in the market, they support Buddhism. So this identification with Buddhism make it easier for any Buddhist organization to move on, including, unfortunately, deviant Buddhist movement. So today, Taiwan is also the greatest exporter of deviant Buddhist sects. Wherever there are Chinese, you can find deviant Buddhist movement, mostly from Taiwan. And today, we also have deviant Buddhist movement exported from China. This Chinese, the deviant Buddhist movement, they quickly shift themselves out from China into places like USA or Australia or Canada, other Western countries. And from there, this deviant Buddhist movement will move around the world, especially to the Chinese community, and gain a lot of resources, a lot of support. Okay. So from here also you can see that actually this deviant Buddhist movement, they had nothing to do with humanistic Buddhism, but they are equally powerful and strong and globalized. Of course, there's a third internal important factor is the emergence of talented leaders. In any movement, you need great leaders. I paraphrase it this way: the traditional Buddhist teachings are like the seeds, okay, and the external factors are like the environmental factors. And for the seeds to grow in such an environment, we need good farmers, and the good farmer means the good leaders. Okay, we need the good leaders. So we have a group of leaders who are intelligent, bold, and ambitious, and know how to lead. And this is how humanistic Buddhism in China would be able to contribute to the world. For example, you have Venerable Ying Shun, dedicated to scholarship, today acknowledged as a foremost Buddhist scholar on Buddhism. And his works have been translated into several other languages too. And then you have Venerable Xing Yi. Each one of them actually they know what to do They focus on something that become their hallmark. So Yingsun is scholarship. Venerable Xingyi is comprehensive development of Buddhism, particularly Buddhist education. Venerable Sun Yan is famous for meditation. Venerable Wei Jie of Chong on meditation. Venerable Zhen Yan, Tzu Ji, charity. So each one of them know how to create a hallmark for their organization. So I say they are actually intelligent, and they are all bold and ambitious. Everything that they build or do is of a big scale, and in fact they are also embroidered in a kind of competition for being the biggest or the tallest. So, for example, Wei Jie built supposedly the tallest Buddhist temple in the world, 36 stories high. 36 stories high. Everything is bold and ambitious. Some of us might not agree with it, but that is a phenomenon we observe. Okay. And for Guangshan would not lose to it, so they built a Buddha relic memorial hall, which is equally big, and the Buddha image is also said to be one of the biggest in the world. And then Venerable Chao Hui, social engagement on all the social issues. And Venerable Qing Kong talking about Pure Land. Venerable Qing Kong, I did not mention him here so far, but he is also one person that's worthy of discussion, because he had a great followings now, also in many parts of the world, Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, France, but mostly Chinese, a follower of Chinese origins. And he uniquely talked about Pure Land, And he is one person different from the others in the sense that he had a vow, he refused to build temples. Enough of temples. So he refused to build temples. So he got a lot of resources that came in. What to do with all these resources? So at first he printed a lot of books. The books would come in containers after containers. So in fact, he sent some of the books to Malaysia. And so we also received containers of books. But after that, we don't know what to do with those books. So, and we have a storage problem. So I think later on he focused on inter-religious dialogue, and like it or not, with too much resources, not knowing where to go. So now he also supported some universities, have some connection with some universities. So I sum up my points here. Humanistic Buddhism in Taiwan, more due to the response to modernization and globalization, rather than due to the thoughts of Tai Chi. Yingsun's teaching does have a great impact among the elites. This one we cannot deny. A lot of elites, intellectuals, scholars like to talk about Yingsun. Because if you are scholars and you want to write something, you would like to refer to someone who can give you a lot of materials. And if that someone is a scholar like Yingsun, who has 6 million words for you to read, then definitely you would like to talk about him and promote him. You would not like to write someone who just doing a lot of great jobs, but not much of written materials for you to write about. Okay, just now we were discussing about the internal and external causes for the internal and external causes for the rise of humanistic Buddhism in Taiwan. Now I want to discuss another topic, and that is whether it is due to humanistic Buddhism or it is due to modernism. We take the case of Si Chao Hui challenged the 8 rules of respect. Her acquaintance with modern arguments concerning legitimation changed the perception of the power structure within the Sangha. Means she is now acquainted with modern arguments. modern concept of gender equality, gender inclusiveness. And this, she would like to use it to change the Sangha with her perception that the power structure of the Sangha must also reflect the modern requirement. So in so doing, she did not, while she tried to say that to make those changes with in line with modern requirements of gender equality, but she did not take recourse to modern social theory, but appeal to the higher authority of the Buddha. Meaning to say, while trying to modernize the Sangha in line with what her acquaintances with modern thinking is all about, she did not use modern theory to argue for it, but again fall back to the Buddha and try to say that, well, the Buddha did not say this. Okay, this Garudharma was not promoted by the Buddha. So actually they try to, so to me it's a kind of modernism, but always falling back to the past. Okay, Ying Sun, in his propagation of Renjian Fojiao, generally follow his teacher Tai Shi without introduce much changes into the theory and practice of Renjian. This we have discussed earlier when we talked about Ying Sun. But he championed the vocabulary and content of the Agama and the early Mahayana doctrines over later formulation. But interesting to note that while he talked about Renjian Fojiao or Humanistic Buddhism, Ying Sun, talking about Renjian Fojiao or Humanistic Buddhism, he actually championed it by referring back to the Agama and the Mahayana doctrine. I mean, going back again to we call it the antecedent, the original teachings of the Buddha, not coming up with new theory. This is similar to all Buddhist modernists who prefer doctrines like dependent origination, no self, while devotional practices and concepts like Buddha nature and silent enlightenments are less valued. So this is really modernism. Okay. So overall, the Renaissance that took place in all the regions in East Asia since the beginning of the 20th century, therefore to attribute to one particular thought, to me is far-fetched. So okay, this is my presentation so far about Taiwanese Buddhism. Okay, you want to stop here or you want to have some discussion before we stop? Before we move on to the next topic. Yeah, I'm waiting for some response. You want to move on, or you have some topic that something that you like to bring up for discussion?
I think we can move on. I don't see anybody doing anything.
Okay. Stop share this one. Okay, now we are going on. We go on for a while first. We go on to Malaysia now. From mainland China, we move to Taiwan, and then now we go on to Malaysia. Okay, to begin with, just let me briefly introduce you to Malaysia. You look at this map of Southeast Asia. Here is China, this tiny island of Taiwan, okay, and this is Malaysia. Okay, we are divided into two parts by the South China Sea. We call it this West Malaysia or Peninsular Malaysia. And this is, we call it the Borneo state of Malaysia. Okay? These are the two states. And then one tiny island here called Singapore. Okay? So, to take you to Malaysia, why do I choose to talk about Malaysia? Not because I'm living in Malaysia, but because Humanistic Buddhism is said to have some influence in Malaysia, which I will show you later that it has nothing much to do with Malaysia. But Buddhism in Malaysia had a lot to do with China and a lot to do with Taiwan. That we can't escape the fact. In fact, it's from here that the Chinese came to Malaysia. Okay? So now, before that, we begin with the early history. Before we talk about Malaysia, why is so important to talk about Malaysia? Because there are a number of uniqueness of Malaysian Buddhism. Number one, it is operating under the impact of multi-religious environment. Just now, when we talk about mainland China or Taiwan, basically the Buddhists still form the majority population in those countries or those areas. But in Malaysia, we are living in a multi-religious environment. The majority of the people here belong to the Muslim faith, about 64%. Okay? But yet, Malaysia is among the top 10 Buddhist population in the world. From China, Japan down, Malaysia is on the top 10 of the Buddhist population. So this kind of environment makes us very unique. Because Buddhism in Malaysia is a minority religion, and how a minority religion operates itself is something of great interest. If you look at the world's number of adherents to Buddhism, in China today is recorded as 244 million. The next country is Thailand, 64 million. Japan, 45 million. Myanmar, 38 million. And then you have Sri Lanka, 14 million. Vietnam, 14 million. Cambodia, also around 14 million. And then you have South Korea, 11 million. And India, 9.25. And Malaysia, we have 5.01 million. That makes Malaysian Buddhist population number 10 in the world, even slightly more than Taiwan and other smaller countries. But interesting to note that United States now have 3.57 Buddhists. Around the year 1860, there were only a handful of USA Buddhists, a handful. Okay? That Colonel Alcott claimed himself to be the first white man from the USA to be ordained as a lay Buddhist, way back in 1800. Okay? But if you look at the population of Buddhism in Malaysia, here, not so accurate, now it's 64%. This old chart here shows 60% Muslim and Buddhist 19.2. So we are 19.2. And then Christian 9.1, and then Hinduism 6.3, and other minorities. We have about 10% of the populations are Indians, and therefore we have about 6.5% Hindus in Malaysia. It's interesting to note that actually this 19.2 is an amalgamation of Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and Chinese traditional beliefs. This is how the form is how we put them together. Okay? If you look at here, the small one, Chinese, the blue one is 2.6. This is folk religion. 2.6, 19.2. Actually, you have to add two together. Because when we do population census in Malaysia, the Chinese, like I said, like in Taiwan, identification with Buddhism, they would feel themselves up as Buddhists. But whether or not they really practice Buddhism or a amalgamation of Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and folk religion is another thing. But the identity, they put themselves as identified. So what I normally do is I will combine these two together to get a better picture. So that is the first uniqueness of Malaysian Buddhism. The second uniqueness about Malaysian Buddhism is it is multi-sectarian, multi-ethnic, and multi-language. Multi-sectarian means here you have Mahayana, you have Theravada, you now have Vajrayana. Vajrayana was not very popular, was not known before the 1970s. But it became more and more popular when Tibetan Buddhism moved from Tibet to India, and from India to the Western world, and from India to Malaysia, or from the Western world to Malaysia. So a lot of Tibetan monks and nuns from India or from the West came over to Malaysia and influenced the population here. So some would turn to become Vajrayana. Otherwise, he was predominantly Mahayana Buddhist by the Chinese. But there was also a big group that belongs to Theravada. Okay? Then it is multi-ethnic in the sense that the Buddhists in Malaysia comprises, the Buddhists in Malaysia comprise mainly Chinese, the Sinhalese, the Thais, and the Myanmar people. But if you take a closer look, actually, I would say up to 95% are Chinese. Among the Buddhists, 95% are Chinese. Only a small minority. The second minority group actually is the Thais or the Siamese. They form about, they contributed about 70%. Sorry, there are about 70,000 Siamese living in Malaysia in the northern states. And they are the followers of Theravada Buddhism. And then we have the Sinhalese. The Sinhalese is even smaller. A figure that I extracted for the year 1980 shows there were only 1,221 Sinhalese in Malaysia. So I could remember the figure, it's so easy to remember. And it's so small, and a lot of them migrated to Singapore for better job opportunities. And the Myanmars, there are hardly any Myanmars living in Malaysia now. Before independence, in the 1950s, there were still some Myanmar fishermen in Penang and some traders, but today almost none. So what remains is just one Burmese temple. So another uniqueness, but despite all these multi-ethnic characters, with the Chinese majorities, we try to accommodate the minorities in as much as possible. Then, in terms of language, we have the Chinese-speaking groups, which are usually associated with Mahayana. That means Mahayana use Chinese speaking. And then we have the English-speaking groups. The English-speaking groups mostly Theravada. So the Sinhalese temples, they use English, and the Chinese who go there also use English. So this English language is widely used. And we have a small population in North Malaysia, in the state of Kelantan, where the local Siamese Buddhists and Chinese Buddhists use Bahasa Malaysia, but very small group. So primarily two languages are used, English and Chinese. So the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia, which amalgamated all the Buddhist organizations, actually have its biennial national conventions, help with 2 languages running. So this is the uniqueness of Malaysian Buddhism. It's interesting to, just now I mentioned 95% is wrong, it's actually 99%. Okay, that means the minority group is actually very small. Now, the mutual borrowing and learning, because of this multi-sectarian, multi-ethnic, and multi-language, you will find that there is now a lot of mutual borrowing and learning. So, for example, sometimes you will see that in the Theravada temple, they will put up a Kuan Yin statue. You inquire from them, do you believe in Kuan Yin? Not that we believe in Kuan Yin, but we believe that by placing the Kuan Yin here, the donations box will be filled. Because the Chinese would come, Chinese Mayanese would come, and they love to see Kuan Yin, they will give some donations. So some Thai temples you can find Kuan Yin, so they're borrowing from each other. And in terms of activities, sometimes religious rites from one tradition is borrowed or used in another place. The third important characteristic is we are operating under the impact of globalization. Malaysia is a very popular ground, it's a very fertile ground for Buddhism. Every transnational Buddhist organization, TNO, transnational Buddhist organization, would like to flock to Malaysia. So just now I mentioned to you Taiwan. Just now the 4 mountains, at least 3, Tzu Chi, Fo Guang, and Sumatra, had their branches in Malaysia. And then the pseudo Buddhists, not real Buddhists, also had their branches in Malaysia. And then from mainland China and Tibet, they also like Malaysia so very much. Even Japanese come here. And of course, a lot of Myanmar meditation master, a lot of people from Thailand, neighboring Thailand. I observed that actually Thailand's influence in Malaysia 10 years ago until now is very much different from 10 years earlier. Meaning the last decade saw a lot of differences because a lot of well-educated Thai monks came over to Malaysia to preach. Whereas 10 years earlier, not many educated Thai monks came here, but a lot of, I would say, spiritual monks who come here and perform rituals came over. But now it's much different. Then Sri Lanka, of course, we have a long history with Sri Lanka because both Malaya and Sri Lanka were under the British rule, and Sri Lanka came over during the British rule. They established 4 temples, Sinhalese temples in Malaysia, and so they have great influence. But today, many Sri Lankan monks also come over, and then we also have India. So actually, many people come to Malaysia, and we will be wondering why so many people are so interested in Malaysia. I think there are 2 main reasons. Number one, because of the language. The Chinese from Taiwan, from mainland China, all this, they find it easy to communicate with the people in Malaysia because the people here can understand Chinese. And then people from Tibet, mainland China, India, Myanmar, Thailand, all this, they find that the people here can communicate in English. So the English language make it very convenient for them to come in. So language is a major factor. And of course, the second factor is this is a place where the Chinese are still relatively resourceful, meaning to say they can come here and get a lot of dana. So when they want to build temples in Sri Lanka, Thailand, Myanmar, they wouldn't forget to come to Malaysia to get some financial support. So in fact, this is like a golden bowl where everybody would like to kick in. And number 4, it is given high recognition by the world Buddhist community. Malaysian Buddhism, despite the fact that it is operating in a minority in a multi-racial and multi-religious environment, it is given high recognition by the world Buddhist community. Venerable Qing, who visited Malaysia several times, used to say that many of his Buddhist monks and nuns now running in temples in many parts of the world were Malaysians or are still Malaysians. And he always praised the Malaysian Buddhists for their skill in English and Chinese, bilingual. Most of them could speak 2 languages. And not only that, Taiwanese scholar Yu Xiangzhou also wrote several articles to praise the Buddhist movement in Malaysia. And we have another important and very unique characteristic is that in Malaysia, lay Buddhist organizations play a prominent role and provided the life force of Buddhism in Malaysia. There are many temples, but there are also many lay organizations, and usually the very active ones are the lay organizations. But temples' roles are still very important because temples' role as a place for religious solace is still very much recognized, and a lot of people still flock to temples. But if you talk about activities that attract people, then most of the activities are organized by lay organizations. And number 6 characteristic is social engagement was identified by scholars as a unique feature of Chinese Buddhism. If you talk about humanistic Buddhism, yes, Taiwan humanistic Buddhism. But if you talk about social engagement in terms of political engagement, then some scholars say actually Malaysian Buddhism is more socially engaged than in, say, Taiwan and other parts of the world. So these have become a social, very important characteristic. So I will spend some time to talk about the last 2 characteristics about lay organizations and also about the unique feature as a socially engaged movement, since we are on this topic of socially engaged movement. So I think we can take a break now, then we come back, we start from the beginning. Okay?
All right, sounds good. Sure.
Okay, just now we were talking about, by way of introduction, I was talking about the 6 major uniqueness of Malaysian Buddhism. Now I would like to go into the early history of Malaysian Buddhism to give you the background necessary for you to understand later the other 2 aspects that I would like to discuss, and that is lay Buddhist organizations and social engagement of Malaysian Buddhism. So now we look at the early history. You all know when Asoka, around like 250 BC, he sent messengers to many parts of the world, Sri Lanka, Central Asia, Egypt, even until Greece. And to the east, he sent people to Suvarna Bhumi. This word Suvarna Bhumi, Su means good, Varna means color, good color means gold. Bhumi, those of you who are Malaysians would know that this is also a Malay word now, means earth. Okay, Suvarna Bhumi means the earth of gold or the land of gold. And where exactly is the land of gold? If you go to Myanmar, they will say it is in Myanmar. If you go to Cambodia, they will say it's Cambodia. You go to Thailand, they say it's in Thailand. And if you ask Malaysians, yeah, a lot of Malaysians say, yeah, it's in Malaya. So, like I said, actually, everybody is right. Because if you look at the map, how people drew the map in the early days, without the GPS, without all the modern instruments, this is how they drew the map. You forget about the center spine here. This is the spine of the book. Okay, you forget about the book. You look at the river. This is from Ganges River that flow out. Ganges River. So this is a Ganges basin. The Ganges River from India flow out, And this part is probably today's Bangladesh, Thailand, and so on. And then this is already Malaya. So it's a vast difference. And then come over here, this part is Thailand, and this is what they call the Gulf of Siam. Gulf of Siam. So if you look at it geographically, anything to the east of the Ranges River, this whole area here is called Suvarnabhumi. So every claim is right. To me, every claim is right. Below here is Indonesia, Sumatra, Indonesia. And Indonesia, they don't call Suvarnabhumi, they call Suvarnadipa. Dipa refers to archipelago. So it is the island of gold. So it's quite obvious that Suvarnadipa refers to this part. So if you compare this map and this map, what a vast difference. This part is this part. Then after that, this part is until this part. And here is the Gulf of Siam. So it was a vast difference, okay? But there is no evidence left for us to see whether Buddhism survived in Peninsular Malaysia. But since it's Suvarnabhumi is such a big continent, most probably it survived in Myanmar, as what Myanmar people claim. So if you look for historical evidence, most likely Suvarnabhumi where Ashoka sent his missionaries would be today's Myanmar and Thailand. But in Malaysia, we have these three northern states, Kelantan, Terengganu, and Kedah. And here in this Kedah area, we have this called Pujang Valley. Today is an archaeological site. This is said to be the kingdom of Langkasuka way back in the 2nd century AD. There's no record here in Malaysia, but the Chinese were very good in recording. So according to the Chinese Liang Su, which was written in the 4th century AD, it mentioned that there was a kingdom, or we call it the Pujang Valley, lying around here during the 2nd century AD. And this is a Buddhist kingdom. So as early as 2nd century AD, probably 100 years after China, Buddhism already took roots in this part of Malaya. And then as I told you before, when Qing in the year 671, he traveled by sea to Malaya and Sumatra. First, he ended up in Sumatra, present-day southern part of Sumatra. And he traveled up to Kedah, which is Pujang Valley today. And he spent 3 months here. And then when on his return journey, he spent another 3 years in Palembang on his journey. This is Qing's description of the city of Boga, which is in today's Sumatra. You might be wondering why I'm talking about Malaysia and why I'm talking about Indonesia now. Because this concept of Malaysia and Indonesia is a modern city-state concept, modern state concept. In the past, this is one whole big mass of land belonging to the so-called the Malay kingdoms. Okay? So they were all the same. Culturally, they were the same place. Okay? So it is mentioned that Buddhist priests number more than 1,000, whose minds are bent on learning and good practice. They investigate and study all the subjects that exist just as in India. The rules and ceremonies are not at all different. If a Chinese priest wishes to go to the West in order to hear and read the original scriptures, he had better stay here for 1 or 2 years and practice the proper rules. So from Qing's description, we come to know that southern Sumatra was a center of Buddhist study, just like Nalanda was in northern India. So this was a big Buddhist center. And Qing also wrote that Buddhism was flourishing throughout the islands of Southeast Asia. Many of the kings and chieftains in the islands of the Southern Sea admire and believe in Buddhism, and their hearts are set to accumulate good actions. So according to Yichi's description, we come to know Southeast Asia was then Buddhist kingdom. And until 11th century AD, that means from 2nd century AD until 11th century AD, for 9 centuries, Malaya or Southeast Asia was predominantly a Buddhist country. And conversion to Islam around the 15th century, but Buddhism survived in small pockets of Chinese immigrants and among Siamese ethnic groups. Historically, it is mentioned that conversion to Islam mainly because of the Arab and Hindu and Indian merchants who had converted to Muslims after the Muslim invasion. They became Muslim. Then they came over to Malaya or Indonesia, and where they brought along their Islamic belief. So the conversion of Islam in Southeast Asia was much less violent than what you see in other parts of the world, and therefore supposedly we are having a better history to forge a better harmony between Islam and Buddhism in this part of the world. So from our description just now, from 2nd to the 11th century AD, this was a Buddhist kingdom, and this Buddhist kingdom went off, and by the time of the 15th century, when the sultans or the kings converted to Islam, then what remained are just small pockets of Chinese immigrants and among the Siamese ethnic groups. But there is a mass import of Chinese immigrants around 1850, when the British came and they needed a lot of workers in the tin mines. We were then the biggest tin mine in the world, biggest tin exporter in the world, and the biggest rubber exporters in the world. But rubber estates were mostly manned by laborers from India, whereas tin mines were mostly labored by Chinese immigrants. But before the mass arrival of Chinese immigrants in the mid-19th century, some Chinese were known to have settled down in Malacca. Perhaps you want to know where is Malacca. This little red top here, Malacca. This is the center of the kingdom. The Malacca kingdom at its peak covered the whole place here plus Sumatra. So one of the earliest Chinese temples that survived until today is the Cheng in Malacca in the years 1673. Survived there. This is the external view of Cheng. It is still there. If you come to Malaysia and you go to Malacca, you should not miss this one. It's just next to the tourist site. In fact, it's within the tourist site. It was recorded that Admiral Cheng Ho, during the Ming Dynasty, when he came to his fleet came to South Sea or Southeast Asia and right all the way to Madagascar in Africa, he made 7 trips, and out of his 7 trips, 5 times he stopped in Malaysia, in Malacca town. So Malacca then was a prosperous country. The traders in Malacca were Arabs, the Indians, the Chinese, the Malays, and 80 languages were spoken in Malacca. So it just give you an idea. The Cheng Ho's fleet. Cheng Ho's fleet consisted of 27,800 men. Imagine in the 15th century. This is like today's USA 7 fleet, and 62 treasure ships and 190 smaller ships. The bigger ships are 17 feet long and 178 feet wide. So it was a huge thing, you know. So Cheng Ho's arrival, you imagine the fleet that came into Malacca town, or for that matter, all of Southeast Asia, right until Sri Lanka and Madagascar. It was fortunately not a conquest, not a battleship. It came in exchange for trading, or for just to show, people say just to show the power of the Ming Dynasty. Now, during the Portuguese rule in Malacca, which was Ming in China, they were captains. The Portuguese call it capitan. We call it captain. The captains appointed. they were Chinese traders in Malaysia, in Malacca. So when they died, where were they buried? And what rites and rituals they follow? So there is a hill in Malacca, we call it the San Bao San, or the local people call it Bukit China or Chinese Hill. That is the home of the early Chinese immigrants. Okay. So the existence of the cemetery called San Bao San or the Chinese Hill and the Cheng Hun Teng, the Buddhist temple, testified to the existence of the Chinese community in Malacca, even during the Muslim rule. Okay. The Cheng Hun Teng and the Bukit China or Chinese Hill or San Bao San signify that there had been significant number of Chinese in Malacca. So the question is, what sort of religion they follow? Okay, so we look at the deities in Cheng Hun Teng temple, then you will get an idea what sort of religions they were following. Okay, now if you look at the object of worship in Cheng Hun Teng temple, you look at the objects. The left altar is dedicated to the goddess of Machu Bo. Machu, those from Taiwan will know what is Machu, guardian of fishermen and seamen. And on the right are the deities of Thousand Tati, guardian deity of the well-being, and Datuk Tian Tai, Xie Tian Tati, or Huan Di, god of justice and his assistant, and also the Tai Sui. So if you look at the spectrum of deities worship, then you will say, well, this is not a Buddhist temple. That's why I need to give you the lectures, or my second lectures about the religious belief of the Chinese. They have all the gods there, all the deities. In fact, if you look at this, there is not even one. There is only a Kuan Yin in the middle. Kuan Yin is still the biggest in the middle, which is a symbolic representation of Buddhism, or symbolic presence of Buddhism. But all the others, they have nothing to do with Buddhism. They were either folk religious belief or Taoist belief. So this is an amalgamated belief system. But it will be interesting to know that the Buddhist monk actually manned this temple. So you have a better understanding of the Chinese religious belief now. In recent times, Reverend Xiangling, Reverend Xiangling was the abbot of the temple, and his student, Reverend Kim Beng, who later became the president of the Malaysian Buddhist Association, and then Reverend Kim Seng, they were manning this particular temple. And there was even the ordination of a British nun by Reverend Kim Beng was held in this temple. So to me, in a way, it is Buddhist, but in a way, it is not. But since it's run by a Buddhist monk, then it is considered Buddhist. And today, most people still regard it as a Buddhist temple. So, why people pay so much interest in Cheng Hun Teng? Because it is a testimony of the religious life of the Chinese then. This is the religion of the Chinese at that time. And why we want to talk about Cheng Hun Teng is because Cheng Hun Teng is not only a temple, it is also an administrative center during the Dutch rule. The first Dutch captain had his office here. Okay, it was the focal point of the Chinese community. So the Portuguese came first, then the Dutch came later. But the captain system was introduced by the Portuguese. But when the Dutch came, the Dutch also continued with this captain, Chinese captain, meaning to say some kind of autonomy. I allow all these Chinese traders to come in, but you manage yourself. So they had a temple, and the Chinese would look after the temple by themselves. So it was not only a temple, but an administrative center. So it's very interesting if you look at Cheng Hun Teng. This is the beginning of political religious entity. It's a political religious entity right at the time of during the time of the Qing Dynasty. It's a place of worship, no doubt. So many deities for you to worship. And then it is a place where all the Chinese and Kuara, they come here and try to settle their dispute. And it is a place for the control of ships. So ships coming in, going out, they might have to pay some kind of a taxes. And Kuan Yin Ping would be the place for them to do the payment, thing like that. And because a lot of traders and a lot of ships coming in, we need a lot of food. So Kuan Yin Ping was involved in encouraging people to do farming. So it played the role of encouraging people to do farming. Then he provided assistance to traders. So assistance like you want to borrow money, Kuan Yin Ping can lend you some money. Make sure you pay. And then he managed levy, like managing taxes. And very important one is allocate burial ground. People would die. And this also shows that those Chinese who came here, some may not be able to return back to where they come from. They would die here and need to be buried here. So that's why the Sampao San or the Chinese hill was managed by Cheng Mun Ting, and Cheng Mun Ting have to allocate the burial ground. And they can even punish minor offenses. So this is the first, I would say this is the first social engagement of Buddhist temples, way back before we talk about and humanistic Buddhism. And then when came the British, just now you were talking about during the Dutch. After the Dutch exchange, the British take Malaysia and the Dutch take Indonesia. The British capital system was abolished, but the Chinese community made its own rules and regulations, and the temple continued to play a prominent role in the life of the Chinese. You see, the Cheng Mun Ting rules and regulations says it clearly stipulates structure, operation rules and regulations in regards to prayers, funeral, and marriage ceremony, chanting, musical band, and etc. So the Chinese actually make its own rule from Cheng Mun Ting. So Cheng Mun Ting is like a government, okay, for the Chinese. So prayers, funerals, marriage ceremonies, how it's to be done, chanting and things like that. And some of the interesting part is, for example, they actually hire monks to manage Cheng Mun Ting. But those days, sometimes the monk engage in selling opiums. So there's a rule that says, if you are caught selling opiums, you will be fired. You cannot become monks anymore. Okay. Or at that time, one of the rules is not to set up opium dens around the temple, not within the temple. You don't sell opium within the temple, but you sell it outside the temple. So if you are caught doing that also, you'll be fired. And that shows opium was quite popular at that time. Offenders remove the Chinese entity, forbidden from entering temple, and forbidden from burial at Santosan and Julutong Graveyard. And this is the most important. The Chinese very scared of what we call 死无葬身之地. Means you die without a place to be buried. That would be the most humiliating part. So you better follow the rules and regulations of Cheng Mun Ting. Otherwise, when you die, no place for you to bury yourself. Okay? Now, just to share with you, the early monks of the Qing Dynasty, when they arrived, they actually started first staying at graveyard. They were employed first not so much to man temples, but to look after graveyard. So, because that is the last rites that is required, so you need monks. Monks were brought into Malaya mainly to perform that last rites. So while Tai Shi condemned this Buddhism for the dead, we cannot deny that this Buddhism for the dead is also very important. In fact, it's the most important to the Chinese at that time. So when they came, they usually stay just nearby the graveyard and dependent on local collective support for their assistance. And recently, when I went through my literature search, I noticed that the first monk that arrived in Penang from Sri Lanka, he also stayed in the graveyard. There was a hut built for him at a graveyard nearby, probably to take care of the Sinhalese. Then that's why actually in the early days, monks, while they may not be well educated, they still play a very important role of taking care of the last of our journey. So we have to be sympathetic to them for the role they play, and not so much as to criticize them for just taking care of the dead. Okay? Because at that time there were very limited resources to build temples. People were generally poor, not well-to-do, and unique, and the monks were hired sort of, and the emphasis is to take care of the funeral rites and other rituals, but not many other rituals. Other rituals are usually prayers during certain times. And as a mark of respect, the monks' names are usually engraved on the temple tablet, where it's usually engraved so and so, who are the devotees, and the monk so and so erected this place. So it's actually also a form of respect for the monk. So I tell you so many stories about Cheng Hun Teng so that we could reflect on the significance of the Cheng Hun Teng in the early days. The existence of temple and graveyard indicated the existence of a Chinese community. Okay? And monks must have been involved in the last rites. And monks were involved in running the temple. This means the life of Buddhism had continued from those days till now. So I disagree with many scholars who say that after the arrival of Islam in the 15th century, Buddhism disappeared in Malaya and only came back again in 1850. That is not entirely true. From the existence of Cheng Hun Teng, we know that Buddhism actually continued to survive, albeit a small community of Chinese still in Malaysia. So, an interesting part is Cheng Hun Teng was a testimony of social engagement of Buddhism in the early days, being part of the political structure at that time. But we need to come to know that the social engagement role of Cheng Hun Teng eventually diminished and later reduced to just a ritualistic role. So today, Cheng Hun Teng is just mostly a place of worship for Buddhists. And for that matter, most temples in Malaysia play a ritualistic role. Now, we were talking about the Chinese. 99% of the Buddhists were Chinese, but we cannot ignore that many scholars ignore the significance of the other minority Buddhist community in Malaysia. So I would like to mention about the Sinhalese immigrants. The Sinhalese, Sri Lankans, whether they are, Sri Lankan, there are two major races, the Tamils and the Sinhalese. The Tamils were mostly Hindu, the Sinhalese were Buddhist. So the Tamils and the Sinhalese were brought in by the British to work in the rubber plantations. But the Sinhalese were mostly brought in to become railway technicians and workers. So when the Sinhalese came, they need to cater to their own religious needs. So they started building their own temple. So in Penang, they built one temple. In Kuala Lumpur, they built two temples. And in Taipei, they built one temple. So at that time, there were 4 Sinhalese temples to cater to the Sinhalese population in those areas. But these Buddhist Sinhalese temples subsequently became of great significance because they had great influence over the Chinese. In Penang, this is the monk who was the abbot of the Mahindrama temple in Penang Island around 1930 something, right until 1965 when he was the chief monk. And this Sinhalese chief monk, he could speak Hokkien, so he communicated very well with the Chinese community and wielded great influence. And he was also among one of the earliest to have what you call Today we call it Buddhist education. They have Buddhist classes for children from the early days. And he was one of the earliest to ask for Vesak as a public holidays, which eventually we got it in the year 1949. And for his great contribution, there is a road next to the temple, which is named after him. So it's we call it the Gunaratana Road, okay, named after him. So you can see that actually the Sinhalese have great following, and today there are many other offshoots or influences coming from this Sinhalese temple. And then there is another temple in Kuala Lumpur. He was a chief monk. After he became the chief monk for the whole of Malaysia and Singapore. And after his demise, this person became the chief monk of Malaysia and Singapore. This is Venerable Kesri Tamananda, the chief monk of the temple in Kuala Lumpur. Also, Sinhalese came into Malaysia in 1952 and made the temple a very important fortress of Buddhism in Malaysia. He did so much job that many Buddhist organizations in Malaysia today, especially the English-speaking groups, were influenced by him. So by that, we recognize that the Sinhalese Buddhism play a very significant role in the overall development of Malaysian Buddhism. Then we also have a minority of people, we call it the Siamese. I mentioned to you Siamese, the third minority. In fact, the second minority group. The Sinhalese is the minority, is the smallest. The second minority group is Sinhalese, mostly from the state of Perlis, Kedah, and Kelantan. Until about 100 years ago, Thai kingdom exerted its influence right until Kedah, Kelantan, and Terengganu. All these were under Thailand. The British only controlled this part. But later, the British negotiated and got hold of this part, Kedah, Kelantan, and Terengganu. But some population here, the Burmese remain. The Siamese remain. So there are about 70,000 Chinese, Siamese, and all these 70,000 Siamese, they are, by definitions, they are Buddhist. Okay, but unfortunate thing is, most of these, there are probably about 100 temples or wats, because every village you have one wat of the Burmese temple here. But unfortunately, they do not preach the Dharma so much probably because of poor education, one thing, and also because of the language barrier. They speak mostly Siamese language and Malay language. So the Chinese in this area will go to the temple just to go and worship, okay, and to offer dana. So that is how Buddhism continued in Northern States. So this is the brief background of Malaysian Buddhism. It's about time, so that we will move on to talk about lay Buddhist organizations and important aspect of Humanistic Buddhism later. But I think for the time being, we will stop here so that we can start the new chapter and the new section later. So this is a brief history of Malaysia and the uniqueness of Malaysian Buddhism. We have a few more minutes, perhaps 5 or 6 more minutes. If you have any questions, we can bring up for discussion now. If you have no questions, get some questions ready or some topics that you like to discuss when we come back later today. Okay, or rather for you tomorrow morning. Okay, any question?
Yes, we've talked a lot about the immigrant communities in Malaysia. What about the native population? Are they mainly Muslim or something else?
The native populations, we call them Malays. We have a very unique situation where the Malays are defined as people who habitually speak the Malay language and profess the Islamic religion. So this is like Tibetans, you know? So a Malay must be a Muslim. We have a few rare cases of, very rare cases of Malay Muslims who abandoned the religion, and that caused a big hoo-ha. and most of them eventually have to migrate out of Malaysia. So Muslims, the native Malays are today Muslims, but my analysis is that their ancestors around the 2nd to the 11th century, they were Buddhist or Hindu Buddhist. Okay. Then you have another group of natives, so-called natives in the east of Malaysia, in Sabah and Sarawak. There are Sabah and Sarawak, they are not called Malays, they are called Kadazans and Sabah is Kadazan, the Dayaks, Kadazan and Dayak. This group, they have some Muslims and some Christians. In fact, it's about half-half. So if a lot of people do not realize, actually, Christian population in Malaysia, about 50% come from natives, but not Malay natives, but Sabah and Sarawak natives. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If not, then we shall adjourn here, and you continue to look at your sky, see whether it's blue or red. Okay.
Elvis has left the building.
See again.
Elvis has left the building.
So we're starting at 6:30 tomorrow morning for us.
Okay. 6:30 for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
it'll be 8:30 for you.
Yeah. Is it very early? 6:30.
6:30. It's in. Let's see. It's in 8.5 hours.
Yeah. Is
Time for
6:30? Is it still dark?
Oh yeah, it'll
Yes.
still be dark.
You all are very
A
hardworking.
little bit.
Good. Very good. Very hardworking.
We'll turn on the lights.
Switch on the light. Work very hard.
Bye. Good night, everybody.
Okay.